Tattoo artists, what was your worst mistake, and how did the client react? I was a receptionist at a tattoo shop. One of the artists misspelled neighborhood on this guy's neck. He spelled it neighborhood, leaving out the first H. Neighborhood was the guy's nickname. It was a pretty large, elaborate tattoo, so there was no fixing it. I don't think I have ever cringed so hard in my life. The guy was surprisingly really cool about it. He did see the drawing and approved it before it was tattooed on. He ended up making the artist tattoo a H on his palm, so if anyone gave him crap about the misspelling, he could smack that person with the missing H. Story 2. I had a client email me asking for a 4-letter acronym. I don't do freehand script, so I put the letters into a font generator and sent him back some options. He picked the one he liked best, and we set an appointment date. On the day of his session, I showed him the acronym again, and we chose a size. I placed the stencil, and he approved it, and I got started. Midway through the tattoo, I asked him what the letters stood for, and he told me. My heart stopped. The letters were in the wrong order. The middle two were swapped. I ran to the shop computer to check my email, and sure enough, in his original email he'd sent me, they'd been correct. I had typed them into the font generator wrong, but to be fair, he had seen them several times since then and didn't notice my mistake. I spent the rest of the session covering them up with another design he'd had as a backup tattoo idea, and I didn't charge him, but it was a good learning experience for me to always ask what initials, acronyms, stand for ahead of time, to make sure I get them in the right order. Story 3. Once had a client call the shop who was crying hysterically because, according to her, I had done her tattoo backwards. It took a few minutes to get her to calm down, to the point where we realized she was looking at it in the mirror. She apologized and hung up. The tattoo was on her back. When I placed the stencil and finished the tattoo, the client was using 2 mirrors, a handheld one and the wall-mounted one. Using 2 mirrors, it looked correct, which it was. When she looked in just one mirror at home, it appeared backwards, the way a mirror works. Story 4. I've never really made any big mistakes that garnered a reaction, but one of my clients has a tattoo from another artist in a local studio that says Granddad instead of Granddad. The studio fired the artist and wouldn't take any responsibility for what had happened. Story 5. I'll bite. I misspelled forward. It was a line of script on the side of a foot and a last-minute addition to a couple of other tattoos they were getting. I quickly knocked it together on Photoshop and nothing looked out of place. The client approved, so I made the stencil. The real duck-up is that I didn't ask them to spell check. I always ask them to spell check, except for this one time. The next day they came back and pointed out that forward isn't spelled forward. I do a lot of reading and I guess it didn't look wrong because I'm used to seeing it as the forward of a book. I apologized profusely, feeling like a total ass, and told them to pick at the scab of the extra E and the W while they were healing to make it fade and come back in 2 weeks. Fixing the O was easy and I was able to turn the E and W into a wide loopy W and add a bit of extra loops and flourish to other letters so that it looked totally fine in the end, albeit a bit stylized. She was happy in the end and still comes to get work from me. 10 years of tattooing and that one still haunts me. There have been other mistakes, but they're mostly the client's fault. Things like dads getting their children's birthdays wrong. Happens a lot, actually. Dude, I don't know what month your kid was born. Call your wife. Also, bonus story. The guy who spells his kid's name wrong. I had him write their name down. Literally, he wrote it down. Bentley, I drew up a fun custom script. He loved it. Put the stencil on him and had him check it out. I even told him to make sure everything was right. All good. Did the lining and had him check it out while we took a break. Loved it. Finished the shading and drop shadow, etc. All finished. He's checking it out in the mirror. Loves it. Until I hear, what about the E? What E? I reply in dismay. The E! Bentley has an E. So I show him what he had written down, and he groans, oh man, I always duck that up. My wife is going to kill me. So I sit down with the original drawing and manage to turn part of the L and the Y into an E, add another couple lines to reform the L and Y, and boom, Bentley. It worked out in the end, and I felt like an absolute wizard. But duck, dude, it's your kid's name, and you didn't notice the spelling was wrong? The 10 times you checked it out during the process? What a job. Story 6. Worked as a piercer in a shop a decade ago. A guy came in and wanted Murphy's Law. The artist freehanded a design on him. He greenlit it after watching in the mirror, and they did a beautiful piece with a banner saying Murphy's Law. Seemed fitting. The guy loved the fact that his one messed up tattoo was the Murphy's Law one. Edit. Some people have pointed out the lack of apostrophe in the spelling. This took place in a small Swedish town, and 100% there was no apostrophe. Swedes are generally decent at English, but apostrophe to indicate ownership is probably the part we suck most at. Story 7. My ex did a large scarification on the client's abdomen. The client had brought in a piece of paper with the stylized word perseverance. I was invited in midway to see the progress and had to tap my ex on the shoulder for a spelling lesson. Story 8. My time has come. I had some really crappy experiences in this shop, but this one was up there. Apologies for the very long story. This was during my apprenticeship. I had been tattooing on human skin for no more than 2 weeks and was very inexperienced. My mentor wanted me to participate in a $13 Friday, the 13th flash special coming up that week. I drew up a flash sheet full of designs that I was confident I could pull off with my limited experience. I spent the entire day beforehand prepping my station, gathering supplies, printing stencils and consent forms, cleaning the entire shop, etc. I decided to sleep on the shop floor that night so that in the morning, I could buy the whole shop some fancy donuts from a nearby cafe and get back in time for the event. Right before it started, my mentor, who was also the shop owner, changed up the rules of the special. He announced on Instagram that people could bring in whatever small design they wanted to get done for $13. I was suddenly being asked to draw and tattoo designs that I was fully unprepared to take on. The shop had one computer with Photoshop that we all had to take turns on to create designs, so our turnaround time slowed to a crawl. And I already tattooed slow anyway since I was so green. The shop was overflowing with people, and we had a wait list with literally over 100 names. Over the course of the day, I only managed to tattoo 6 or 7 people. I ended up working for 14 hours straight, didn't even have time to eat any of the donuts. Just as we were about to close up shop at 2 a.m., one girl walks in and asks if she can still get in on the special. She wants a butterfly. My mentor tells me to take care of it. I'm exhausted, but hey, you don't tell your mentor no. So I print the stencil and I get started and my hands just stop functioning. My wrists were so sore and cramped from working all day that I couldn't control the tattoo machine anymore. It was the strangest, most horrible feeling. I watched in horror as, no matter how hard I tried to tame my gnarled hands, I just completely botched this girl's tattoo. Lines were all squiggly and off. I even hit into her arm in some places. I felt absolutely horrible. It looked horrendous. I called another artist over to finish the tattoo for me and told the client that her tattoo was on the house. She left without saying much. We closed up shop after she left, and I told the other artists to go on home while I stayed behind and cleaned up. I cried as I cleaned. I made only enough money that day to cover the price of the stupid donuts. By the time I was done cleaning, it was 3:30 a.m., and I still had to ride my bike a few miles home. I was so tired that I decided to spend a second night sleeping on the shop floor. I woke up early the next morning to ride home, and the rear wheel had been stolen off of my bike. I had to carry it 2 miles to the nearest bike shop and spend $90 on a new wheel, tire, and cassette. I thought that was the end of that nightmare until a week later, I'm at home and get a call from my mentor. He's screaming through the phone. Apparently, the butterfly girl went and left a 1-star review of the shop on Google's after her experience with me. He said I had disgraced the name of his shop and the other artists that worked there. I had to come in the next day and apologize to each of them personally for damaging their reputations. I then had to contact the client and apologize once again to her and offer her another free tattoo. She never responded. The whole experience was humiliating. I've been told by other tattoo artists since that my mentor is mostly the one to blame for this whole situation and that I'd been set up to fail. But I still feel so awful about what I did to that poor girl's arm. I should have known I was just too exhausted to keep working. I should have called that other artist over much sooner to fix my work before I made it worse. I should have done a lot of things differently. But at least I learned from it, I guess. Anyway, I hate tattooing butterflies now. I'm no longer at that shop. Yay. I'm now working at a private studio with a good friend, and it's been lovely. I don't work in a small town per se, but I work in a pretty well-connected town. So I won't reveal my location or my IG since it would probably be easy to figure out just who my mentor is. But I appreciate everyone asking. For all of the completely unreasonable crap my mentor out me through, he also taught me so much. He was a great teacher, and he really did put a lot of time, care, and effort into my apprenticeship. Even though we're no longer in contact, I still really love and respect the guy. I'm forever grateful for my experience at that shop and my apprenticeship under such a talented, highly experienced artist. But I'm also happy to have moved on. Story 9. A few years ago, I was tattooing a client who had apparently lost a bet. His buddies were allowed to tattoo something behind his shoulder, as long as it wasn't racist or offensive. Turns out, the guy drew up a design of a leprechaun throwing up on a book. Sure, why not? Everyone was sober and they were paying pounds up front. Easy work. The drawing was really simple and the shading was easier than I thought it'd be. Turns out, everyone liked it, except the guy with the tattoo of a leprechaun throwing up on a book. He picked at the scab, trying to get rid of it, completely took it from bad to worse. Comes in about 10 days later, demanding a refund of money he didn't pay, or the studio, not me, cover it up. Nope, the management said, You signed for it in your right mind and then damaged it yourself. Personally, I was yelled at and told never tattoo anyone like that. It only works in television series or films. Did I make a mistake? Yes and no. The lesson here is don't get involved in others' drama when permanent body marking are involved. Story 10. So I didn't mess up, but I had a client scared me. I was tattooing his sister's name on him. She passed away. Gabriella, with one L in it. Past the point of no return, he asked me, "There's two L's, right?" I think I had a heart attack, and he started laughing. He thought it was hilarious. I died a little and pretended to laugh. Story 11. Did my first one on an old schoolmate who was aware of my artistic abilities, despite having never applied ink before, and he offered me his back. I had 3 pros watching as I drew a geisha free-handed on his back while he was hunched over. When the design was laid out, he checked it in the mirror and was good with it, so I began lining it. The thing is, the other artist said it looked great, but unfortunately, I was doing something else when he checked it. So I didn't notice just how screwed up it really was. Anyway, I lined it and we took a break. As he stood up while I was watching, my heart dropped as I witnessed the geisha's face droop into a palsied state on one side. He was sitting leaned forward with his elbows on his knees while drawing it and so distorted the canvas. Now, this sounds crafty, but I never really liked this guy too much. He originally wanted a back full of strippers. So I didn't feel bad that when he went to look in the mirror, he lifted his shoulder to look at the tattoo, which normalized the proportions, and he said it looked awesome. Well, good then. Big lesson learned though. I still have the occasional nightmare over it. Story 12. I was doing a big old tattoo of Cringer, aka Battlecat, on a really cool client's leg. I got so into doing this big, awesome tiger head that I forgot that it wasn't a goddamn tiger and colored the stripes black. I realized about a third of the way through filling them in and let the guy know. He was disappointed, but mostly okay with it. I felt like I was going to puke. I finished the thing feeling so ducking sick and then refused payment. Man, going from that feeling of elation to immediate crushing disappointment was hard to shake and kind of dazed me. It was extra crushing because it was a fun tattoo during a time when I wasn't that busy and was doing mostly absolute dreck. The payment was just the icing on the top, so letting that go was hard too. Ugh, just thinking about it now is making me feel sick. Story 13, got a small tattoo on my foot. As he was making a line, I heard him say, "Whoops, I now have a stray line that's jutting off away from the rest of the tat." Fortunately, over time, it has faded, but it's such a crafty tattoo. The whole thing is just the worst. It was only $60, so I didn't say anything, and just told myself one day I'd get it covered up by something better. The main reason I didn't complain is because the tattoo artist was, and still is, my best friend's neighbor. Story 14. I gave a guy a tattoo in prison of his girlfriend's name on his arm. I knew him on the street and his girl and knew it was going nowhere and insisted he change his mind. He didn't, so I made a bet with him that crap was going to go belly up within 6 months. When we got out of segregation and back onto the yard, a few weeks passed at most, and I can see him having a bad conversation on the phone. He called me over to his cell and offered me up a huge ducking sack of commissary without a word. I didn't take it, figured he needed it more than me. Still feel like crap to this day. I thought I was going to get dragged, but you mother duckers are supportive as hell. Living out here is ducking hard, and every time I go to bed, I dream about being inside again. I saw a psychologist like 2 weeks ago, and she said I'm showing classic signs of PTSD and institutionalization. I keep putting off my follow-up appointments, but I'm going to reschedule. Thank you all. Story 15. My only spelling mistake ever was in Italian. Girl wants a phrase in Italian. She writes it down no less than 5x on a paper. I tell her to make sure it is correct. I don't speak Italian. She insists it is correct. I draw up some nice script, tattoo it with no issues, bandage pay, and she leaves. She comes back in hysterical and tells me I spelled it wrong. I hadn't thrown out the paper. I spelled it exactly how she spelled it. I asked what she wanted to do, and she decided, no one I know speaks Italian. That was about 15 years ago. I often wonder if she ended up getting it covered up. Story 16. Apprentice here. Nothing major but bad karma on one tattoo from the get-go. That absolutely floored my confidence for a bit. Only recently did my first ever small tattoo on a client. Had to do a small range of flash ideas. That I felt comfortable with. Had my mentor, who, judging by some other stories I'm very lucky to have, has a sound dude, discuss with me beforehand my needle choices, placement technique, usual bits, and was ready to go. Every felt ready. Midway through, my machine goes as brand new, my only one. Managed to sort it without much fuss. In doing so, in my panic, put the wrong needle size in the machine when it came to replacing it with a fresh one. Botched a line when I realized almost immediately the size difference. Change again, nerves are shot. Back at it. Brand new foot pedal breaks, replace it with an old one from my mentor. It breaks too. Power pack dies? That was brand new too. Panic. Spill my ink. Practically had a meltdown in my brain about what has happened. Carried on with another artist's equipment, apologizing as calmly as I can to my client. Mentor calmed my nerves, and I ended up pulling it out the bag and doing a job I was happy with somehow. But most importantly, the client loved it. Anyway, not a crazy bad story, but as an apprentice who's also a fairly confident dude, I have never felt so absolutely floored in my life. Tattooing someone is monumentally stressful when all doesn't go to plan. I can't wait to do more and progress, but duck me, what a time for crap to happen. My mentor helped me sort all my gear afterward and was super cool. Sat with me and said something like, well, of all the times and all the things that could have gone wrong, that was the absolutely perfect one for them. Nerve-wracking stuff. Edit. To everyone that's replied and messaged, can't thank you enough for putting me at ease. We're currently back locked down in UK, so I'm using this time to finesse some artwork, practice and stuff. But confidence was still a little shot, so this has helped quite a lot. It's a dream come true. So I appreciate the lot of you, undoubtedly sexy people, you. I'd buy you all a box of fresh donuts if A, I had the money, and B, it wasn't illegal in the UK currently to see other people. Plus, a whole ton of other variables, but you get my drift. Story 17. I had a client who decided he wanted lettering on his forearms, sayings in Greek and Hebrew. He doesn't speak either language, but he had one of his friends double-check the spelling before he sent the references to me. Came in, we did the tattoos, pretty simple appointment. Fast forward to a couple weeks later. I get a message from my client about the tattoo that was done in Hebrew. He owns a small construction restoration company and has a few Israeli guys who work for him. Apparently, they were giving him a lot of crap for his Hebrew tattoo. He originally thought they were just messing with him because it was spelled wrong. The font he had chosen off a quick Google search essentially changed a couple of the letters, kind of like the difference between an F and a T, making it a completely different word. We ended up being able to fix it pretty easily and had a good laugh about it. But definitely beware when you're getting tattoos in a language you and your artist don't speak. Story 18. When I started tattooing, I was working at an awful studio that would often give me works that didn't fit my style in any way. Very fine line works, which I wasn't very good at. The mistakes I made were usually crooked tattoos or going too deep, and instead of actual helping me, the owners either would yell at me later, force me to tell clients I was more experienced than I actually am, and got upset that I asked too many questions. Eventually, they just stopped giving me work altogether. Sadly, every once in a while, they give my number to unhappy clients that I tattooed at that time, and I still get calls asking me for compensation. I know it's also my fault for those things, but they really took of any responsibility. These days, I have my own small one-person studio. I have nothing but sweet and satisfied clients, and ironically, I do a lot of fine line tattoos, which I used to hate at that studio. But if you want something specific, while I was in the studio, some girl wanted a cursive tattoo that was extremely tiny. It was extremely small and thin, and when I finished it looked good, but when it healed, a lot of the letters spread and mashed up together, and because she barely had any tattoos, it was very noticeable. I gave her money back, even though she demanded me to pay for tattoo removal. And yes, she signed a contract beforehand, but the studio told me it protected only them and not me. I read thoroughly, and fortunately realized she had no case against me, so she couldn't sue. In general, today I recommend people to steer clear of that place. Disgusting money grabber a hole. They do treat other tattoo artists who work for them like crap. Story 19. When I was but a wee baby piercer, I worked at the biggest shop in my city, which had 14 artists and 2 piercers. It was the peak of the tramp stamp trend. I'm still so sad that was the nickname. Ass antlers were so much better. So when a super tiny 18-year-old black woman came in and wanted her name on her lower back with a flower, it was just normal. An older white male tattoo artist took her to pick a font. It took a minute, even though back then everyone went with Edwardian. But they came out, I had her do paperwork, and he got the drawing finished. She okayed the design, she okayed the stencil. She sat for the tattoo, loved it, tipped him, and left. 2 hours later, she called back sobbing, saying we ruined her life. The counter girl told her to come in and we would fix whatever was wrong. Tattoo comes back with her 2 gigantic, angry friends who are ready to freak out. We finally see the tattoo. Her name was Whitney. The N got left out in the font process. So huge, across her lower back it said Whitey. It was covered for free and with many apologies with 3 giant purple roses. The tattoo artist was so ducked up over that he didn't come in for a week. It was an honest mistake, but it was the worst ducking spelling error I've seen. Story 20. I was working at a shop in NYC. This very heavy-set gentleman came in and wanted a full back piece, no other tattoos. The design was very elaborate and quite good. Once it was all approved, the tattoo stencil was applied. And again, approved by the client. I wasn't doing the tattoo, but I was occasionally checking in on the process. Once the line work was done as shading had begun, I noticed something horrible. The stencil was applied over his rolls of skin on his lower back. I made a comment to the artist privately. He went back to tattooing, moved the skin apart at one point, and, without a doubt, several inches of untattooed skin. The client never noticed. I stopped working there not too long after that, not for this reason. I've always felt so bad for that guy. Story 21. When I first opened my shop, I was super nervous about making mistakes, and those first few clients were a roller coaster of anxiety. Well, of course, one of my first clients came in and asked for a tattoo to be covered because another artist screwed it up. The tattoo was meant to be a peanut riding a motorcycle. However, the tattoo artist screwed up, and it looked like a junk riding a malformed motorcycle from hell. So, I got to work covering it up with a new design. She asked for a raven to cover it up, since I could color the raven in black and cover up the other artist's mistake. No problem, all good, right? No, the tattoo was in a super awkward position, and the client wouldn't stop squirming. Eventually I finished, and to my dismay, I noticed my duck up. I didn't cover the peanut part of the original tattoo properly, and the raven looked like it had a little junk coming out of it. When she realized, she was angry and demanded it be fixed. The only solution I saw was to attach another smaller raven to the original one as a sort of chain link. The client now tells people that the tattoo is two chained ravens because our inner darkness must be chained. But we both know why she really got it. A little junk man. Story 22. I work at a tattoo shop with a few artists. One of our artists ducked up tremendously on a face tattoo. She did the stencil beforehand and showed him. After his approval, she started above his brow. He wanted to be cursed, but he left the shop with cursed tattooed on his forehead. He was pissed, of course, never saw him again. Story 23. Tattooing a kanji backward. Client brought in the reversed image. I made a stencil and applied it, and the client checked it in the mirror and gave the okay. Came back the next day claiming I did it wrong. I pulled the original out of my box and held it up next to the tattoo and said, "Nope, that's what you brought in." Felt bad, but still laughed when she left. Long story short, you as a client are responsible for spelling. Tattoo artists are not cultural experts or professional grammar Nazis. You pick it, we just stick it. Story 24. As other artists have said, none besides some blowouts and wonky lines that were fixable when I was a new artist. But I've fixed some really ducked up ones, mostly spelling mistakes, some terrible ones. But I had to make a cover-up of one of the guy's sons. The portrait was wonky and obviously done by a kitchen wizard. The worst part was that all the designs the scratcher did around it were for a girl. They weren't approved by the client. The scratcher that did it thought it was a little girl and did all kinds of pinks and hearts and bows in the hair and around it. The worst part, he wrote, "Daddy's girl." The lettering basically butted right up against the portrait on top and bottom, so just covering up the designs wasn't possible. It needed a full-on cover-up, which I would have recommended regardless of the crap portrait by itself. So, we covered it up with an approved design, and he came back to my shop for my version of the hyper-realistic portrait of his son that he wanted. Story 25. Oh, Semi. Recently I did an armband of sheet music on this walk-in, and I put one of the segments on upside down because I don't read music, and it looked right. Client noticed when I was about halfway done with that segment. Luckily, she was cool and just said she should have checked her stencil harder and shrugged it off. Story 26. Tattoo artist here. Best case I ever saw. A guy came into our shop asking about a cover-up. The tattoo wasn't done at our place. He had what we call a belly rocker, one of those lettering tattoos that arcs over the belly. Think Tommy Lee's Mayhem tattoo. Usually gothic font, gangsta-type piece. He had beautifully executed bold, black, Old English letters across his belly that were supposed to read, "Scarred for life." Whoever did the tattoo, as well as the tattooed guy, had forgotten one of the letters, an R. This guy came in with "Scarred for life" on his belly. We showed him some cover-up options, including full torso, Japanese-style bodysuit stuff. Someone may have joked about doing the old proofreading trick of just putting a little red arrow and adding the missing letter. I don't know who did the thing, but never saw him again after giving cost estimates for the giant cover-up. 15 or so years ago, we still joke about this one. Story 27. This happened back in 2012 when I was really new at this. I was tattooing a good friend of mine. He wanted a clock tattoo, my first one ever with Roman numerals, with a mask next to it. Once the drawing was done, we realized that the mask was not fitting properly on the leg due to other tattoos he had. So I went to the printer and flipped the design, mirrored, put it on the leg, and it was more than perfect. I start the tattoo, we chat, and then I'm done. He gets up and checks in the mirror to see the final result, and he realized that the clock had the Roman numerals flipped. 3 was at 9. We both froze, laughed it up, and went back on the table to fix it. At the end, It turned out to be not as bad as I thought it would be. Story 28. I've been tattooing people for a while now. This guy wanted to tattoo his dad on his upper arm. After a couple hours, I was on the mustache. It was a goatee. I started around 3 or 4 o'clock, and when I was done, I couldn't help but see this horrible mistake. I made a stash and a goatee. As I now call Whitey, I gave him $75 off and never saw him again. Story 29. Tattooing for 21 years, and one duck up so far. Only one I can think of is that I switched a couple, his and her kanjis, about 20 years ago. Mind, I'm Dutch, so kanji is far of my vocabulary language-wise. And this was before everything was easy to find on the internet. They provided the kanjis themselves. I made the stencils and put them on them and had them look in the mirror, etc. Never crossed my mind to double-check. And they didn't notice either. But as they provided them with the right translation underneath the kanjis, it was on me 100%. Clients are nervous, etc., and can easily miss such a simple mistake, but I should always triple-check. They weren't mad about it and laughed it off, and of course, I didn't charge them any money. We had one rather funny one a couple years ago, though. A guy came in wanting his son's name on his wrist in a nice fancy script. We let people write down the names themselves so we can draw from that. And as I walked past my coworkers he was putting the stencil on, I noticed the spelling seemed off. He had written down the Nam Cheyenne with an S, so I asked him if it shouldn't be a C for Cheyenne. He told me that he knew best, as he gave the child the Nam and laughed it off. Next day, he was back with a red face, as his wife made fun of him all night for misspelling the name. And a couple months ago, a guy came in with a lion and a huge clock on his entire upper arm that he had done at another studio near us. The clock was backwards, as in mirrored. The ducking tattooer had 12 ducking numbers. To find out he messed up and never even noticed. Clients can miss this, though, when they look in the mirror to approve it. It looks okay. That was one of the biggest duck-ups I've seen, I think, in all my years. Story 30. Artist here. Spelling mistakes are common in the industry. I'm the first to tell a customer that I'm a terrible speller, so they had better check everything before the needle hits the skin. I once had a customer who had to call his wife and confirm how they spelled their daughter's name before we got started. And it's a good thing he did. But oftentimes, the worst mistakes are stray line, most often caused by flinching or missing details, usually a result of losing part of a stencil during the tattoo process. I've heard of clients being fairly crushed by tattoo mistakes, but generally they can be corrected with a little creativity and skill. My worst mistake was made when I was learning to tattoo. As an apprentice, I had to take what I could get when it came to practicing. Thank goodness for dumb friends. I tattooed over some very thin skin for the first time, inside the elbow, and blew out a couple of the lines. A blowout is when the needle goes a little too deep and the ink spreads a bit in the soft, slushy layers of the skin. It looks like a permanent bruise, and in this case, it looked like the tattoo was trying to cover up track marks. She didn't say much about it at the time, but I knew she was pissed. Luckily, I was eventually able to shade over the area and cover up the mistake when we added to the tattoo. Story 31. Dang, I'm late to the party. This didn't happen to me, but to an artist that used to work in the booth next to me. Some lady comes in and wants a pocket watch with roses in her arm, so my coworker agrees to do it. The client specifically wanted the pocket watch to be stopped at 4:20. He draws it up for her right arm, and she's so excited, but for some reason, she decides to change it to the left arm last minute. No problem. He runs in the back to the printer to mirror the image. She loves it, and they slap the stencil on and start tattooing. When they're almost done, he realizes when they mirrored the image, the clock doesn't say 4:20 anymore. It says 7:40. He doesn't know what to do besides finish the tattoo. When the client checks it out in the mirror, she doesn't notice, and ducking loves it. The lady ended up coming back a few weeks later to say once again how much she loved it. I always wonder if she ever found out. Story 32. I went to college with a veteran tattoo artist, and she told me that she's made a few mistakes, but nothing too crazy. She told me the worst freak out a customer had was when she was making a Celtic knot to his own specifications, despite her telling him that isn't how they're supposed to look. He paid for it anyways. She made the tattoo, and the idiot didn't like the results and pushed over a couple shelves and broke the window with a chair in frustration, all while cussing her out. When he was arrested for his blunder, the police uncovered a lot more about him than his terrible tattoo idea. It came to light that not only was he addicted to heroin and evaded taxes, but he also abused his wife and son. Story 33. My grandma passed away and I got her date of birth, date of death, with a hummingbird, and the phrase, "Your wings were ready, but my heart was not." So the artist had it all drawn up. I approved it, she finished, I paid, and left. Got to my mom's, showed her, she loved it, posted a picture on Facebook, and 5 minutes later, my cousin texts my mom about my grandma's date of birth. At that very moment, I realized with horror that I had the wrong month in her date of birth. Apparently November's the 11th month, not the 10th. Who knew? I laughed as soon as I realized what had happened. My grandma would not have been pleased with me getting a tattoo in the first place, even though I have others. So I take the mistake as her last. Damn you. Also, missed a comma. Story 34. My roommate from around 2009 to 10 bought a tattoo machine and had a couple big duck-ups. He did the tattooing in our garage. A lot of people got tattoos from him. A lot of people's tattoos got infected, and none of them were good. There were two major duck-ups, though. One, he had two guys that were in a hardcore band together ask for the Boondock Saints, Veritas and Equitas tattoos, but on their calves. One guy got Veritas on his right calf, and the other was supposed to get Equitas on his left calf. The idea was that if they stood next to each other, it would flow together. My roommate didn't have a computer or printer, so he had the guys both print off the words in Microsoft Word, so they could have it be in the style they wanted. Needless to say, none of them knew how to spell it right, nor were any of them smart enough to search the internet first. So the one guy ended up with equities. 2. A girl asked for a peace sign with some flowers on her pelvis. He tried to freehand the tattoo because he was out of the transfer paper, and the girl ended up with a sideways Mercedes-Benz logo. Her friend came along with her, and between the two of them and my roommate, none of them noticed the mistake. The girl's boyfriend noticed it pretty quickly though, and they both came back to our house angry the next day. They tried to fix it by adding the missing arm of the peace sign, and it looked even more ducked up than as a Mercedes-Benz logo. It got really infected because she did not take proper care of it overnight, and then he tattooed it the next day. It was nasty. Don't get tattoos in people's houses. Definitely not in their garage. Story 35. Misspelled the name Jamie. Haimey. I asked the client for the spelling and showed the client the laid-out script before it was applied. So, not my fault. The client was very disgusted with himself for not knowing how to spell the name of the woman he loved enough to show it on his skin for life. I felt sorry for the guy, so I offered him a cover-up at an incredible discount, as well as the name reapplied spelled correctly. Unfortunately, he never took me up on that offer. Story 36. I used to do kitchen tattoos for a lot of people in high school. I was always very careful as you can be with no formal experience, but one day I really ducked up. My friend came over while my parents were out of town. We smoked and downed 2 bottles of whiskey. Afterwards, we were ducked up, chilling in my bedroom, when he asked if I would give him a tattoo. When I say I was ducked up, I mean ducked up. I said yes. He asked me to give him a big sun with a face on his chest, so I went for it. Completely. Freehand. This thing is a solid 4 to 5 inches wide, and it looked demonic. Like the sun from the Teletubbies got hit by a semi. He tried to pick the scabs to get rid of it, but that thing would not budge at all. He never seemed upset. He kind of just laughed it off. I ended up fixing it later on, and now it looks decent. But years later, it still keeps me up at night. Don't do stick and pokes, guys, especially if you're intoxicated. Story 37. I have 2 off the top of my head. Both were when I first started tattooing. 1, I was tattooing an armband with my client's parents' birthdays. So, 2 armbands stenciled evenly apart, just above the wrist. At the time, I was unaware on the tricks of how to properly stencil bands. After a full hour of stenciling over and over, we finally got them perfectly straight and even. Got right to tattooing. Only problem was, I did the same date twice. Client wasn't very upset, knew I was still a beginner. 4 years later, I have done 2 full arm sleeves and 2 full leg sleeves on him. Never wanted to cover the armband. Still there to the day. 2. Shorter but much worse story. Last session on a black and gray sleeve, client requested a clock and roses. Mistakenly, the peace out to fit the left arm, although it was for the right. No big deal, I'll just flip the image. Wrong. Did not think about the fact that the numbers would now be going in the wrong direction. Immediate panic when I realized the numbers were not backwards, assuming it went unnoticed by the client who was looking in the mirror. Went to the back of the shop to collect myself and came back into the piece. Ended up tattooing the Roman numerals in the clock larger in the correct order, with some white highlights to cover the excess. Still looks fine to the day. We start his second sleeve at the end of the month. 3 years later, everyone makes mistakes. What's most important is what you learn from them. Story 38. Way back in the day, I was a piercer at a shop. Everybody sitting around in the lobby waiting. This is when everybody used to get Asian symbols tattooed on them. There was this couple, and the girlfriend was Asian. Across from her was this guy with symbols down his calf. Now I'm at the counter, and she proceeds to say, "What do you think that says on your leg?" He proceeds to say, "I love my mother." Chinese Mandarin dictionaries can spell out everything in English, but when mixed together, They mean completely different things. She proceeds to bust out laughing like a jester in the king's court and proceeds to tell him that the true translation is that I love horses. Story 39. I've been fairly lucky and able to fix or cover everything I've done. It's all little stuff, like always, only has one L. Getting a date mixed up on translation while going through various fonts, or the dreaded started coloring the wrong side of a nautical star. Crap still gives me chills, and I've developed a bit of OCD asking and double-checking all the things. I've got 16 years in this game, and I am only human. The absolute worst I've witnessed. A guy did a huge, flowy script on a girl's thigh, supposed to be born to lose, actually said born too loose. The only thing I could do was a massive cover-up. Story 40. My husband works at a tattoo shop. One of our friends from the gym we go to lost their child. Since they knew us, they went to the shop my husband works at as the piercer. The tattoo artist drew it up and they approved it. Well, he accidentally invented the death date to 02 instead of 20. They only realized it after the first tattoo was done on the wife. The husband went ahead and got the wrong date as well. The tattoo shop paid for laser removal and correction. The clients were very cool about it, but the artist was a wreck. If it weren't a child's memorial tattoo, I don't think he would have been as upset. It's all been fixed at this point. Story 41. Unfortunately, during my apprenticeship, I messed up plenty of tattoos. My mentor wouldn't exactly mentor me. He would pop in while I was tattooing, say nothing, and leave, then give me advice after the fact, instead of giving me direction during the process so I wouldn't duck things up. I wasn't allowed to buy machine. He was very old school. I had to build my own machine and needles. Well, I'm not mechanically inclined at all. So, I constantly had machines on the fritz, which of course affects everything. He also wouldn't give me a reliable power source. I had to use this massive, ancient power source that was used by hospitals in what appeared to be the 80s. It would also go on the fritz, making at times my needle stops right in the skin. What a nightmare. Story 42. Luckily and thankfully, I haven't really made any mistakes in regards to spelling or anything like that. One of my previous coworkers, though, sheesh. He had spent hours drawing script all along this guy's side. It was a fairly large verse, about 4 or 5 lines, and it went from the guy's armpit down past their waistline. Anyway, he gets done drawing on him, and we all think it looks great. All 3 of the artists there, the client, his friends, everything is good to go. Once this kid gets the tattoo done and is halfway through his drive home, lives 3 hours away from our shop location, the artist who tattooed him was looking at a picture he took of the finished tattoo and realized he missed the N in the word strength. He immediately called him and scheduled a touch-up and somehow managed to fit the N in almost perfectly. Really, no one but those of us who were there would notice it was an afterthought. We all couldn't believe how many of us didn't catch it beforehand, or even once the tattoo was finished. Story 43. Girl I used to know was tattooing a Manchester City badge onto someone. Little bit airy around the ears. She's thinking of her boyfriend while she's doing it, who's a Manchester United fan. 2 hours later, irate customer returns demanding to know why she has a City badge tattooed on her leg with the letters MUFC in the scroll. Story 44. I once tattooed a skull with a pocket watch inside of the mouth. The day of the appointment, the customer changed the position of the tattoo to the other arm. So I just flipped the design, printed it, stenciled it, and started tattooing. When I started shading it, I realized that the watch also inverted when I inverted the design and didn't take into account the direction of the numbers on the clock. They were Roman numerals, and the customer hasn't realized anything to this day, and I'll see him again in a few weeks for another design. Don't plan on mentioning ever. Story 45. I tried to tattoo patience on myself when I was 16, using the stick and poke method. I made it as far as patient and stopped. I never finished it. Eventually got it covered up when I was 28. I literally didn't have the patience to finish it. It was a funny story to tell for all those years, and a lot of my friends were disappointed in me for covering it. But I have no ragrits. Story 46. I've been tattooing for a while. I'm dyslexic as duck. I always give the client a look at my design, and we spell check every word twice. Once before the stencil goes on, and again once it's on the skin before we start tattooing. People still spell names wrong and get dates wrong all the time. But the worst thing that I've had go wrong is with aftercare. I use second skin product to help heal the tattoo. A client had a shower, and the second skin wasn't airtight. Water got in, and they didn't notice. Basically, the whole tattoo ended up as one big wet scab and peeled out. 3 months of healing later, reworked it, and it ended up being okay. Story 47. Not my customer, but the same shop. We didn't take a deposit on a junk tattoo. Guy walked in wanting a sucker, lipop tattooed on his junk. Anyways, when the tattoo was over, he refused to pay. and the guy who did it was left scared for life, as he initially said he would never tattoo another dude's genitals. So worst thing ever was learning not taking deposits. Story 48. A client once gave me the wrong spelling for his daughter's name, and then tried to pin the blame on me once he went home and, presumably, got chewed out by his wife. Tattoo artists of Reddit. Who was your worst tattoo virgin? Story 1. I had a client who got a Jesus fish with Greek letters on his chest. I put the stencil on, he looks down, says, "Looks good," and we do the tattoo. Guy sits like a champ through his entire first tattoo. I finish up after about 45 minutes. He checks it out in the mirror and immediately goes pale, starts to sweat and sits down. Dude looks at me and says, "It's backwards." All shook. I look at his tattoo, look at him on the floor, look at the mirror and tell the guy, "I'm going to take a photo of it for you to see, because you don't know how mirrors work." A couple minutes go by as I'm handing the dude paper towels. The guy stands up all quick and tries to play it off like he was just messing with me, even though for a minute there was a corpse on my studio floor. Story 2. One shop I worked at, we had a couple come in on the day we did $100, 2-inch by 2-inch tattoos. They both were getting these small triceratops outline tattoos behind their ears. Nothing too crazy or detailed, so maybe about 15 minutes each in the chair at most. The guy's losing his mind. He's hyperventilating, laughing, jumping up and down, and yelling questions at all of us, visually very nervous. He tells one of our apprentices that this is his first tattoo and keeps asking them how bad it hurts over and over again. The owner went into the back and grabbed an ammonia packet, worried the guy would pass out the second needle touched skin. Turns out it was this couple's first date. He had told her he was impulsive, and she tried to call his bluff and suggested they get matching tattoos. To his credit, he got the tattoo and didn't pass out. Paid for them both, too. Story 3. It's not the worst, but I love this one. At the expense of my very good client, I generally use this story to help noobs ease into my chair more comfortably. So it was his first, and I'm getting my stencil prepped. He was so nervous, he was basically white. Kept asking if he was good. Yeah, he was okay, I guess. Place the stencil on him and ask him to take a look. He looks at his arm and immediately passes out in the chair. He's sliding out of the chair. We get him back up, and he comes to. He got over it eventually and has his sleeve Story 4. Not a tattoo artist, just heavily tattooed, and have a lot of friends who are artists. Allow me to tell you the story of Danny the Dummy. Danny, at the time of the story, was a 21-year-old oil field worker who had more money than sense. He wanted to get an entire sleeve tattoo done, but couldn't decide what he wanted. He would come in for a consult. The artist, my friend, would take everything he said and draw up what he wanted. Then, he would come back and completely change his mind. That's not the reason why he's called Danny the Dummy, though. He's called that because, among other things, he never once could remember the name of the animal he wanted to get. He first asked for a lion pack, in on a mountain with the moon above them and them roaring into it. My artist friend said, "Oh, you mean like the end of Lion King?" And Danny said yes. The next time he came in, he said the animal was wrong, and when he showed the picture, it was a wolf pack. So my artist friend drew that. Danny comes back and decides he doesn't want that. He instead wants an eagle in flight. So my artist friend drew that, and if you guessed the animal was wrong, you're keeping up. He in fact wanted an owl in flight. After this, my artist friend was basically done with Danny. He was going to do this last drawing. And if Danny changed his mind again, he was going to fire him as a customer and blacklist him in his shop. Well, he drew an amazing owl in flight, and Danny said he loved it. So finally, a date was selected, and Danny was going to come in and get it. Well, Danny never showed. About half an hour past his appointment time, my artist friend calls him, and Danny says, "Oh, damn, man, I'm sorry. I'm out of the country today. I'm in North Dakota." The artist is based in Arizona. Danny thought that different states were different countries. Never saw or heard from him again, and my friend ended up putting that owl on a coworker of his that loved the drawing. Story 5, not the worst client, but just an unfortunate event. The apprentice at my shop, who had only been tattooing for a little under a year, was tattooing this girl's wrist recently. Her first tattoo, the word undefeated. Gets the tattoo, it goes smoothly. She likes it. Walks to the lobby, shows her dad. He likes it. Walks back to get bandaged up. Gets bandaged. They walk back to the counter as he's explaining aftercare. She blacks out. Falls back, hits her head on a giant painting hanging on the wall, an Ed Hardy original. The painting falls. Glass breaks. He runs over, picks her up, and is checking the back of her head. Realizes a giant piece of glass had punctured her shoulder. Trap. EMT comes, tell her she needs stitches. They end up having to take her to the emergency room where she got 6 stitches. The next week, the girl brought him a giant tub of cookies. She wasn't the worst, but it was an incredibly unfortunate experience for the both of them. His first time having someone pass out and her being defeated. Story 6. There's a few different ways you can go with worst. Is worst most reactive? Is worst most picky and unreasonable? I've been pretty lucky in the grand scheme of things. My worst, most reactive, annoying client was this dude who was very clearly an addict. He came in, wanted a simple tribal tattoo on his stomach. I saw sure no problem, but he starts haggling me about the price. At first it was $400, then he said no more than $200. We finally settled on $300 after about 20 minutes of back and forth. I get all set up. We start the tattoo. Within a minute, he says he needs to stand up. He's in too much pain and needs to walk around. He walks around for about 2 or 3 minutes, then lays back down. Gets tattooed for another couple minutes, and then same thing. He does this constantly throughout the entire tattoo. During this time, he was constantly scratching his head, twitching all over and complaining loudly. But the worst part wasn't the fact that this 2-hour tattoo turned into almost 4 hours. The worst was that he kept going out for smoke breaks, but kept only taking 2 or 3 puffs, putting the cherry out and then putting the smoke back in his pocket. So all I could smell the entire time was musty cigs. It was ducking disgusting. The cigarette smelled old. If you've ever smelled old cigs, you know what I'm talking about. He also kept putting it in the pocket that was right beside my face. Story 7. Not your usual tattoo virgin story, more of a rant on my behalf, but I've been tattooing for almost 8 years now. The worst experience I have had with a client was a lady who my workmates and I would call the Hello Kitty lady, 30-something-year-old tattoo. So essentially the design we were working on was Hello Kitty, riding a pink dragon, half sleeve, shoulder to elbow. Now I specialize in Japanese tattoos, which for the initial consultation she expressed how much she loved my style of Japanese dragon. So here's me thinking, sick, I can smash this dragon out the park and just put a Hello Kitty on the dragon. Easy peasy. Booked her in for a full 8-hour day. So we begin tattooing. We start talking about how much we both love art. And she's heavily praising the tattoos I do and my tattoo style. Super friendly, and we're hitting it off. She's talking kind of loud, which I take it's because she's understandably nervous, meaning my workmates can easily hear her speaking as well. Fast forward to our 20-minute lunch break. I finish eating, and so I walk out to front reception, where one of my workmates tells me, "Hey man, I was outside, having a smoke with your client." Not too sure if she knew I was an artist as well, but she was real upset with how the tattoo's going. She says it isn't hurting as much, that you're not doing the tattoo properly, because her skin's not red, irritated. And she said, there's no way I'm paying all that money for a tattoo that isn't done properly. Completely caught me off guard and went against everything we were talking about. So when we came back to tattooing, I made sure to be overly reassuring, letting her know exactly what I was doing and why I was using certain inks, which she'd insist were too light of a shade of pink, but I knew this pink was going to heal exactly the way she wanted it. Anyway, we finish up and I get home, check my emails, and there are 2 huge paragraphs on how much of a crap job I've done, and that I never did what she asked for. We both clearly agreed to the design beforehand. I do this with every one of my clients, where I get them to check the design. I reply reassuring her that the tattoo will heal as planned, that the colors will settle, and that it is easily fixable. I put paw prints on Hello Kitty to show it was the underside of her paws, and not just 2 little random clouds poking out. But she didn't want them, even though they were in the original design she approved. No worries, I gray lined them so they'd be super easy to fix. She replies with another long paragraph on how I should tattoo and listen to my client's wishes, which I don't reply to because at this point, I know she is overreacting and it's her first tattoo. 2 weeks later, she emails saying how much she loves her tattoo, it healed perfectly, the pink was the right shade, and that she wants to book in to finish it up, if she apologized or if I finished the tattoo. So I didn't end up finishing. I palmed her off to another artist. Basically told her I felt uncomfortable, that I wasn't going to meet her expectations, purposely worded it that way. In reality, I wanted nothing to do with her. I was wondering whether I was being a junk for doing so, but I even felt uncomfortable emailing her. So I did the right thing. She also never apologized, didn't even acknowledge her behavior. Since then, I take even more precautions before booking in clients. Story 8, buckle up. This one might get a bit long. In around 2000, I had only been tattooing for about a year or so. I had a lady in her 40s come in for her first tattoo, a walk-in butterfly on her left shoulder blade. She was a server at a sketchy strip club in town and was pretty haggard. She also had her 16-year-old son with her. We get about 20 minutes into what should be about a 45-minute tattoo, and she says she needs a break. Now I know better than to leave a client alone when they need a break, but I was pretty green, so I stepped out for a smoke. When I came back in, she was standing up, bent 90 degrees forward at the waist. with her face on my workstation. As I get closer, I see that she's standing in a puddle of her own urine and is passed out standing up. She's leaning forward with enough weight on her face to keep her from falling to the floor. Her son is frozen in his chair and doesn't say a word. Fortunately, she's wearing a skirt, so she didn't get her clothes all soaked. I get her conscious again, and she says she needs to go to the bathroom to clean up. During the approximately 20 minutes she's in the bathroom, I mopped my floor a couple times and got everything good to go if she was still feeling up to finishing. Again, now I just tell her to come back another day. But I was pretty new. I just wanted to finish, get paid, and get her the hell out. Anyway, after 20 minutes or so, she comes out of the bathroom and says, "Don't worry, I cleaned the bathroom." Damn. What did she do to the bathroom that would require her to clean it? She says she wants to finish the tattoo, so she sits, and I start working again. About 5 minutes in, I notice something on the outside of her knee. I look again and see that it's a little chunk of crap. Not on the front of the kneecap, but on the side. I'm thinking, how does that even happen? As I look away from the turd, I see her 16-year-old son just noticed it too. He looked at me and then at the floor for the remainder of the tattoo. I didn't know if I should say anything about the poop or just finish the tattoo, get her out of there, and proceed to drown myself in a bottle to try and kill the memory. I decide not to say anything, partially to save her kid more embarrassment. Anyway, I wrap it up, get paid, get her out of there, and proceed to the bathroom to see what she did to it. The bathroom had a urinal and 2 separate stalls. There were circular crap smears over the entire floor, and crafty toilet paper in both toilets. Like she blew up right inside the door and got down on her knees in a desperate attempt to clean it up. That must have been how she got the turd on the knee. I'm still curious how it ended up on the outside of the knee. I'm still curious if she ever noticed it there, and I'm still amazed that I didn't quit tattooing right then and there. Story 9. Not an artist, but I'm a receptionist at a pretty popular tattoo shop in my town. I've seen quite a few people who had no business getting tattooed, but by far my favorite was this one guy who wanted to get some script tattooed behind his ear. He had come in before to get priced out, but absolutely refused to make an appointment and drop a deposit. He came back a few days later as a walk-in, so we squeezed him in that day. He was a mess getting done, shaking, sweating, and basically crying in the chair. The tattoo itself took maybe 15 minutes. Well, the reason why this dude refused to put a deposit down was because he planned on getting tatted and leaving without paying. As soon as the artist put Sanoderm on his tattoo, he jumped up out of the chair and bolted for the front door, then promptly passed out as he ran through the lobby lumfeo. He ended up breaking his nose as he hit the ground, and we called the cops. The best part was watching this dude cry like a baby because he was just a few days from getting out of the military and local PD notified his command. Best shift ever. Close second was the newly turned 18-year-old girl who legitimately wanted a junk tattooed on her. Yes, she was sober. No, we didn't tattoo her. Story 10. Not an artist, but just got my first tattoo and asked her this question. She had a woman come in with her boyfriend to get her tattoo. The lady screamed after the needle first came down and told her boyfriend that she was going to have to bite him to cope with the pain, chomped on his arm the whole time while screaming. My artist told me she thinks it was some weird kink thing that she did not consent to participate in. Story 11. Had a customer that wanted a little watermelon slice on his thigh. Cool. 10 minutes, nice and easy for a first tattoo. Nope. On the third line, I hear a weird little low-pitched moan, looked up and his head flipped back and the rest of him followed. When he woke up on the floor to 3 guys trying to pull him back up, he said something along the lines of, "What the heck, why are you touching me? That's awful. Been like 4 years since then, and he still hasn't come back to get it finished, LMAO. Story 12. Have 2. I did piercings, but my friend was an artist at the shop we worked at. Had a girl come in, no ink, no piercings. She wanted to get, no joke, daddy's girl as a tramp stamp. She was in tears moments into the tattoo, like hysterical crap. She suffered through altogether probably 25 minutes and walked out with girl right above her waistline, hilarious. The other was a guy. He had a few small tats on his arms, nothing crazy. He was also one of the, I watch UFC and wear tap out, don't duck with me types. He wanted a pretty large tribal chest piece, collarbone to collarbone. He was told that we recommended a couple of sessions. Them craps is going to hurt, and this is a lot of outlines and a lot of shading. He insisted no, he could sit. He ended up fainting toward the end of his outline. I worked there for roughly a year after, and he never came back to get it finished. Story 13, a friend who had never had a tattoo before wanted one on her ankle and was adamant about that. I told her several times that the ankle is a very not fun location and asked her if maybe she'd prefer the shoulder instead. She insisted on the ankle. Okay then. The moment the needle touched her, she hollered. "You sure you want to keep going?" I asked. She said yes. That was the loudest appointment I ever had, but to her credit, she made it through. Story 14. There are freshly 18-year-old kids, you're newly divorced from a controlling spouse, and finally doing what they want, adults. Folks who've left religions or jobs that forbode it, and I've seen my fair share of bucket list, elderly with paper-thin skin, but a heavy drive to get at least one before they go. With every first tattoo, you'll find out the client doesn't know much about getting a tattoo. Maybe they've done hours upon hours of research. There are those who walk in on a whim from the street. Frankly, the worst are those who've watched every season of Ink Master and have convinced themselves they know more than the artists in our studio with 100 years of experience between us. I've genuinely had a person who's never touched a tattoo machine in their life give me advice about how to more effectively use my gun to tattoo. Relax, Brent, I've got this. Then, of course, the micromanager. And I don't like to make generalizations about people, but do have a tendency to have the same persona as the can I talk to you manager types I've encountered. Tammy wants an infinity sign, feather, butterfly, mash up with the birth flower of every member of their extended family incorporated. Their kids daub in Roman numerals in every color of the rainbow and make it fit in a 2-inch space on their wrist facing them. So they can read it because it's for them, or you're gonna have a 1-star review on Google faster than you can say, perhaps we leave out the butterfly, then the tough guy. My cousin Ryan got a big rib tattoo and fell asleep. I'll be fine. Nah, I'm not scared. Sitting 6 hours for this throat piece will be a breeze. Then 3 lines in with the 11RL, our man Ryan's cousin is fully saturated, and I've got the Apprentice running to get our new friend a soda and a cold wet rag for his forehead, because I know what it means when someone's lips go white and I see the life leave their eyes. Ryan's cousin, you okay, man? I think you were out there for a second. Maybe this throat tattoo wasn't a great choice after all. The least of my worries is the people who are nervous or jumpy. Look, I duck and get it. Tattoos hurt. I'm continually shocked that people keep coming back and paying me to hurt them more. Love having them, hate getting them. I like to think I'm empathetic enough to make my clients comfortable and feel safe. Being tattooed is a vulnerable situation. It's my responsibility to comfort you, and I will. We don't care if you need a break, within reason. We don't care that you are nervous. That's normal. Let us know how we can help. We just want to do our jobs, and we know more about tattooing than you do. We know what looks good, where it hurts most, and how to use our equipment. Part of your job as the client is to trust us. We don't want you walking around with a crafty tattoo with our name behind it. All in all, most tattoo virgins are cool as duck. It's an honor to me that you trusted me to give you your first tattoo. If the trust extends that far, also trust us to take care of all aspects of the tattoo. Story 15. My worst one by far, though, was about 5 years ago when I was apprenticing in a college town. This girl came in with her boyfriend for a traditional butterfly above her elbow. I was still super new, so it took me way longer than it should have, maybe 2 hours. I lay her down on her stomach with her arm bent at her side. This is relevant later. Anyway, we start tattooing, and within maybe 10 minutes, she starts getting a string of texts from her freshman friends, telling her they're essentially ousting her from their group, and they don't want her to contact them again. Super mean stuff. Obviously, she's upset. As she's relating all this to her BF, she starts crying, then full-on sobbing. I asked her if she wanted to stop, but she insisted on me continuing, and I felt too awkward to counter her. She continued to sob on and off for probably another hour, while I just kept plugging away at this dumb little tattoo. At this point, she had cried so much that her tears had gathered where her arm was pressed against the massage table and had started to spill over into my lap. So I'm feeling uncomfortable as hell, and now also damp. Then, as I'm within 30 minutes or so of finishing, she begins whimpering, then moaning loudly. At one point, she tells the BF, "This is more intense than anal," and I wanted to die. As soon as I finished and checked her out, my coworkers, who had all been waiting on me to close, were like, "What the actual duck was going on, and why did you keep going?" But in the moment, all I could think was to finish the tattoo ASAP. To her credit, she came back a year later and told me she had been too embarrassed to come back, but loved the butterfly and wanted another tattoo from me. Her second session was pleasant and without incident. Story 16. This girl's first tattoo and my first paying customer. I tattooed people for free during my apprenticeship. She wants a star outline on the side of her heel below the ankle. She's a bit nervous, so I allow 2 of her friends to come in the room with us. I start the tattoo and immediately she gets away super hard. I warn her not to do that and try to relax. We start again and she gets her foot. The 2 lines I've done now look like crap, and I'm already pissed, freaking out inside. I get her two friends to help hold down her foot, and she continues to get around and at one point kicks me right in the jaw. Needless to say, her tattoo looked like crap and I was crestfallen. I called my mentor after work crying that I ruined my first tattoo on a client, and she kicked me in the face, to which he said, "Wait, what? Nah, duck that. It's not your fault. I'll see you tomorrow at work." Been tattooing 13 years now and still love every minute. Got way crazier stories under my belt since that kick in the face. Story 17. I asked this question if every tattoo artist I go to. The last tattoos I got were just above the back of my knees. It didn't tickle, but it was fine. A girl the bed over from me is getting a really cool-looking owl on her thigh and weeping the entire time, sniffing and wiping her tears, whimpering occasionally. I ask my question. Oh boy. We had a guy come in last year for his first. He passed out and pissed himself. I didn't know a human could hold so much piss. The tattoo artist doing the owl tattoo chimes in. I had a guy throw up a few weeks ago. The whole studio stank real bad. They swapped some other stories, but these were the best. I love these stories so much and will. As the question every time I get tattooed. Story 18. Mine was a young lady who wanted a semicolon tattoo on her wrist. Maybe 1 inch by 2 inches. Black ink. No preference on font. Easy enough, and I had the stencil all ready to go before she even came in. I was expecting a 15-min job max, so I gave her a pretty cheap quote. Anyway, she turns up for her apt and she's very nervous. I do my normal. It's about as painful as a cat scratch. Nothing to panic about. Speech, and she informs me that she's already taken a strong painkiller and would like the specialist numbing spray as well. Okay, that's an extra 30 pounds. She agrees. Spray goes on, stencil goes on. We're ready. I don't even make contact with her skin before she starts making a very loud, high-pitched whine. I try and calm her down again and tell her that she can have a few mins to get her courage up if she wants. But 99% of the time, the anxiety of getting a tattoo is usually worse than actually getting one. Bearing in mind, the parlor at the time had 4 other artists, all with customers, all staring at her. She just kept putting it off. She'd say, okay. I'd turn on the gun, and she'd freak out again. After an hour, I told her that I was expecting another client, and she could reschedule if she wanted. She just bolts out the door, didn't even pay for the numbing spray. To this day, I can't quite believe how dramatic she made the whole thing. Story 19. Not a tattoo artist, but I have a friend who acts all tough, and he has about 3 small dots on his chest because he cried like a baby when trying to get a chest piece. The artist couldn't finish because he kept jumping around every time the needle hit him. So now he has a permanent reminder of being a git. Story 20. Had someone come in asking if they can bring their emotional support animal. Usually this is kind of iffy because it could be a sanitation risk, but we made exemptions for good dogs. Found out the emotional support animal was a 3-foot-long snake, turned down instantly. So many people passing out high on painkillers before their appointment, taking continuous videos and posting how inked they were with their new ankle beach wave, or even one person tipping me in expired Subway coupons. Just be cool and calm while getting tattooed, and everything will go smoothly. Tipping isn't required, but it's how a lot of tattoo artists get their income. Good rule of thumb can just be 25%. I personally tip artists $30 for a tattoo that takes an hour, $50 for 2, $100 for tattoos that take 4 hours or more. Also, depends on how good of an experience you've had, and if you like the tattoo. And if you're worried that you didn't tip the first time, I've always understood usually I would have clients who got their first tattoo, come back for another and tip me double as an apology, or come back another day and give me a tip. Don't worry. Story 21. I did tattoos for like 3 years until I got fired because business was bad. He asked to get the name of his wife of 2 years tattooed on his arm, which is normal. But he screamed like a maniac. I mean, more than a woman during childbirth. That was the most uncomfortable I've ever been. Story 22. Not a tattoo artist, but my friend tells this story had to share here. So he went to the pharmacy to get some prescriptions filled in North Carolina. They tell him it's going to take about 1 hour to fill and to come back later. So he walks out of the strip mall, and the next place over is a tattoo shop. He goes in and asks for a random tattoo. They tell him it's going to take about 15 minutes to do the drawing and about 30 to tattoo it on him. He asks what they can do right now instantly, and they tell him they can pierce his nipples. Within 1 hour, he gets both nips pierced. A pretty sweet tattoo and his prescription filled all in one regular Tuesday afternoon. Story 23. A bit different, but I was the front counter person for a tattoo store. I was basically just there to look hot, but I was still too young to realize that's why I had been hired. I had a few tattoos, but 0 visible while I was working. Since I'm at the front desk, I'm also the DJ for the place, in charge of the music playlist. Anyway, one day I'm doing my college HW, playing some Elliott Smith, and before I know it, the store is in after hours. aka no new clients, but current tattoo sessions can go on as long as they need to. This guy's getting his neck tattooed, and he taps the artist for a timeout, turns to me and goes, "Shut this pussy crap off the duck right now and play some death metal, or I'm walking out of here with half a bobcat on my neck and no money for your boy." So I changed the music. He was definitely only 1/4 joking. Story 24. I was the worst tattoo virgin. Didn't know you were supposed to tip the artist until a couple weeks later, a friend asked me how much I tipped. Made more sense why he seemed really cool until I checked out and was all pissed. I was too embarrassed to go back and tip him, but I wish I would have now. It's been 10 years. Story 25. When I went to get my very first tattoo, there was a girl ahead of me getting her first as well. I was already a little nervous because I didn't know what to expect, but I started out small, so I didn't think it could be that bad. Apparently, the girl ahead of me had the same thought, but her pain tolerance was almost non-existent. She ended up throwing up absolutely everywhere. I stood there in horror, not only because of the barf, but because I was next. I thought, is that going to be me? Turns out I have a pretty high pain tolerance, at least in comparison to her. Story 26. I asked my tattoo artist about the shop, and he went into this story about how this older lady came in to get her feet done. She did fine, but afterwards she was hitting on him because she just assumed he was into feet now. He said she straddled him and offered him sex or something. Story 27. I met a guy in a bar once who said he passed out while getting his first tattoo. What was left was a small loop on his wrist that looked like the outline of a flaccid junk. Story 28. Girl comes in to get her ex-boyfriend's name tattooed as a tramp stamp. Comes in with friends and proceeds to scream throughout the process of doing the outline, and she leaves with a half outline of her ex's name. Story 29. So she was technically never an actual client, but I had a teenage girl, about 16 years old, come in once. She wanted a tattoo of a rose on the side of her neck. Now, I'm certainly not going to even entertain a neck tattoo for a teenager period, but she didn't even bother to bring a parent with her to sign for her, so it went from a certain no to an absolute never in a million years. She got pretty upset and made a scene in our front area, and I told her to leave. After a lot of arguing, she finally left, but not before making some idle threat. Other than sharing the story with my coworkers over beers later and having a laugh at her audacity, I think no more of it. Until the following week when an incredibly angry middle-aged woman comes barging into the shop, screaming how she is going to have us all shut down and sent to jail. Everybody in the shop was pretty confused, and after we got her to stop screaming at all of us, we finally got it out of her why she was so angry. Apparently, her daughter had went out and got a neck tattoo without her knowledge. It was around then that I recognized the girl from the week before peeking in our front windows. It all clicked. She had found some sketchy artist in a kitchen to tattoo the rose on her neck that I said no to. I told the mother to call her daughter in, and her daughter pointed to me and told her mom I was the one who did it. The tattoo was terribly done, to say the least, so the mom definitely had several reasons to be so livid. She started getting upset again and yelling about how this was going to get me fired and sent to jail, etc. I let her yell until she had calmed down enough to listen. Then I explained to her how the week before I had told her daughter outright that I wouldn't give her a neck tattoo. Her daughter screamed that I was a liar, and mom started up with another round of yelling, this time about how I was calling her daughter a liar. It was around this time that I just decided to point to our CCTV camera in the front area until the mother noticed what I was doing and stopped. I told her if she would like to, she could review the footage of me denying her daughter the temper tantrum, and then her daughter leaving the shop. We usually keep footage for a week or two and then delete it, so I knew it should still be on the computer. Her daughter started looking pretty nervous around this time, but she didn't say anything. Meanwhile, I find the footage from the day, and mom watches the entire interaction that I described go down. Then, with the coldest look of anger, betrayal, and disappointment, she turns to her daughter. She takes her outside of the shop quietly and then screams at her outside for basically everything that has just happened and how humiliating it all has been. After a bit, the daughter comes in and gives me a very sarcastic apology and then leaves. Now, at this time, I was still willing to tattoo minors with parental consent, but I'd been having a lot of crafty dealings with them and occasionally their parents. I had been considering a no minors at all policy, but this experience solidified that in my mind. Aside from 1 or 2 exceptions, I haven't tattooed any minors for the last 13 years now. Story 30. Went in for my first piece, 5+ hours. Was obviously nervous, and I'm not that great with needles, but as soon as we started, I was like, oh, this is way easier than I built it up to be. I was feeling the pain, but knew I'd be able to commit. About 20 minutes later, I start to feel really dizzy. My vision is going. So I sit up. She stops immediately, and she's talking to me, but I can barely hear her. The world is closing in, and it's only getting worse. I think she asks if I'd like to go to the bathroom, but I know I will make it 1.5 steps before passing out if I stand up. I can't tell her this because my brain is not working and speech is not an option. And then I start gagging. My artist is scrambling for something to help me, but she's not fast enough. I vomit into my mask, my hands all over my dress, into my hair, onto the floor. It's a mess. I'm a mess. I immediately feel better and go to the bathroom to clean up whilst this poor artist is wiping up the rest. I come back, still stinking of vomit. I offer to take my dress off and literally sit there in my underwear while she finishes. She completes the tattoo like a champion. She sits with me in vomit aura for another 5 hours. I am mortified and make sure I tip extra for the inconvenience. But the tat is stunning, so it was worth every minute. I'm bringing a bucket next time, just in case. Story 31. A few years back, when we still had flash all over the walls, this 18-year-old kid and his dad came in. Right off the bat, they were definitely weird. The dad was looking through the flash and giggling. Calls over my coworker, still giggling. Coworker asks if he can help him. There's drawings of naked ladies here. Yeah, calm down, sir. This is a tattoo shop. That's traditional flash. And you're a ducking adult with a kid. So presumably, you've seen one before. Imagine my joy when the dad lights up. When I said I'd be tattooing his kid, and he creepily says, "Oh, a female tattooist." The kid was the one getting tattooed, and he finally settled on this hideous, ICP-esque, creepy clown. We're talking that old Cherry Creek flash, so this was spectacularly gnarly. I redrew it to at least correct some things I felt needed correcting, and stenciled it onto his stomach. From the moment needle touched his skin, it was like tattooing a bucking bronco. On top of that, the kid didn't have the best hygiene, so when he started sweating, it stunk up the whole shop. And that takes some doing, seeing as how the smell of green soap and weed are not easily overpowered. The apprentice ran the sink and poured bleach down the drain and opened the windows to try to tame the smell. Oh, and not to mention that the kid was moaning like he was getting ducked. It was terrible. The tattoo was supposed to be full color, but 2 minutes in, I knew he'd never make it. So I finished the outline, one of the worst I've ever done, and told him we'd make an appointment to do the color another day. He agreed, and I wrapped him up, half expecting him to never come back. Surprisingly, he did, and he sat so much better that second time. We took a break about halfway through, and he said he was going to grab a soda. He never came back. Weirdest thing was that he'd already paid in full, so it's not like he ripped me off or anything. I always wondered about that. It was so strange. Story 32. Not an artist, but my regular artist. Told me he had a guy come in to get his birth year tattooed on his back in Gothic script, but insisted it be really tiny. The guy then bragged about being inked. Story 33. Not an artist, but I have a friend who is. Her worst virgin client was a girl who was terrified that the tattoo would hurt a lot. She assumed it was going to be so painful that she took a bunch of painkillers before the appointment. The problem is, most pain medicine causes blood to not clot well, so she ended up bleeding more than normal and freaked out to the point that she passed out. She ended up going to the hospital with maybe half a tattoo. Story 34. A couple of years ago, I had a girl come in for what was supposed to be a simple little seahorse. It was only about 5 inches long. This was going to be her first tattoo, and she told me that she had a severe fear of blood, that she always passed out whenever she sees blood or even thinks she's going to see blood. After that, I should have never agreed to tattoo her, but she said that she wanted to do this so that she could get over her phobia. Well, the outline itself should have taken me about 20 minutes or so, but it took me well over an hour and a half to get through. This girl passed out about a dozen times, and after each time, I would have to revive her, get her some water, hold cold compresses to her forehead and back of the neck, elevate her feet and get her calmed down, and no, you can't just keep working on someone after they pass out. And I couldn't just leave her with a couple of random lines that would look awful. I had to finish the outline. The worst part was that I had gotten what I think was food poisoning the night before. So I was just gonna do this little tattoo and then go home and get some rest because I still felt awful. I didn't think I'd ever get that outline done. Story 35. Not a tattoo artist, but halfway through my deployment to Bosnia, 1996, I got a 3-day pass to Lake Balaton, Hungary. In the local town, there was a pretty good tattoo shop, and they did a lot of tats during that pass. This one army guy who was a tattoo virgin didn't get 1 or even 2 tats, but 4. 4 rather large, hand-sized, and garish, like the artist had a 12-color crayon box worth of ink to choose from. Tats on each side of his upper chest and each upper arm, shoulder. Really dreadful. Story 36. Kid who wanted to get a full sleeve as his first ever tattoo convinced him to get a smaller tattoo for his first ever. He proceeded to throw up after, now this sounds like an exaggeration, 5 seconds. Story 37. Had a 19-year-old lad in the studio. He wanted Laura in large letters on his forearm. I took my time to quiz him. Turns out, Laura was his sweetheart. I also spent a long time explaining that tattoos are for life and girlfriends come and go. He remained adamant and clearly explained that if I didn't do it, he had a friend with a tattoo gun who would do it. So I did it, wrapped it up, and explained aftercare. As he left, I checked the time. Great. 22 minutes to my next client. 22 minutes later, my client turned up on perfect time, followed less than a minute later by Mr. Loverboy. Apparently, he'd met Laura at the park, who instantly dumped him for being so ducking stupid. It would appear she wasn't as in love with him as he assumed. 22 minutes from tattoo to requesting a cover-up. Story 38. I dated a tattoo artist for a couple years and spent a good chunk of time at the shop. One time, a girl we knew from school came in for a large tattoo on her ribs. I think it was flowers. Anyway, everything is set up. She's stenciled and laying on the chair, just chatting and waiting. As soon as the needle hits her skin, she starts screaming bloody murder, moaning and begging him to stop. So he stops, shocked, and she tells him in her normal voice to ignore her and keep going. Screaming fit proceeds. Every so often, he'd stop to check she was all right, and she'd respond in a normal, cheerful tone that she's excited to see how it turns out, etc. Needle hits skin, back to screaming like she's being eaten by a pack of wolves. I watched a couple people walk in the shop and turn and walk right back out. I'm surprised cops didn't show up. Anyway, I think he only got the outlines and some shading done before he couldn't deal with it anymore, and said something about scheduling another session because he had another client coming in. She never came back to get it finished. Story 39. The first tattoo me and my two best friends got was 2 quarter-sized Japanese characters that say loyalty. We were 18 at the time. Before my buddy went, he started to uncontrollably sweat and got super pale. The tattoo artist was a total pro, gave him a Coke and a lollipop. About 15 minutes later, he was good to go. This doesn't fit your criteria, but fast forward 15 years, and I'm getting my back piece drawn on freehand while standing up. I don't know if it was the pot cookies or locking my knees, but all I managed to get out was, I need to sit down. The next thing I know, my artist is slapping me in the face while I am sitting on the chair, with all my weight going forward into his arms. Same deal, cold sweat, pale, Coke, and candy. Took me about 25 minutes to snap out of it and get tattooed that day. Story 40. Obligatory. Not a tattoo artist, but my first tattoo was a simple filled 2-inch by 1.5-inch tattoo. My big mistake was placement, right on the tendon above the ankle. It hurt like hell. I didn't scream, pass out, or throw up, but I did start talking and didn't shut up. My boyfriend told me to focus on a topic and just info dump, so I did. About American history. Specifically, I talked about the section I was studying in college. I hated this class and the teacher. The subject matter was the most boring thing in existence, to me. Ironically, I had a test 2 days later and passed with a 100%. It was the first time I had made above an F in this class. I've had 2 tattoos since and managed to not repeat the incident, but did share the story with my artist. We had a good laugh over it. Story 41. I've been tattooing since March, so I haven't had any super awful clients. So far, the worst was my own husband. I gave him his first one right above his knee. He was sweating like crazy. At one point, he says to me, How can you go and just let people do this to you for hours? But he made it through and has a few more ideas, so I don't think he's a one and done. A few days after that, I tattooed a girl's ankle, and she was having a rough time. Not crying, but shaky and whining. I was glad I experienced it with my husband first, because I felt better about holding her leg down and pushing my, oh, she's hurting, thoughts out of my head. Story 42. Not an artist, but I overheard this interaction when I was waiting to get a tattoo in Bali. The client was a first-timer who was there with her mom. To paraphrase, her request was something along the lines of, yeah, so I don't really know what I want, but I'm thinking something really cool and artsy. I like animals, but it doesn't have to be an animal. Just something really cool that kind of captures me as a person. But like, whatever you think, I trust you. The artist, who was a pretty no-nonsense Ukrainian woman, basically said, okay, how about you think about it and come back when you know what you want. Bye-bye. Story 43. This older lady, maybe late 50s, early 60s, comes to our shop. She's quite timid as she approaches the front desk, and I say hello and ask what we can do for her. We'll call her Ab. I've never had a tattoo before. Me. That's fine. It's not as scary as you think. What was it you wanted doing? Ab. Well, my boyfriend is finally letting me have a tattoo. Me. 0.0 Ab. But I wanted just something small and out the way, so if I change my mind, I don't have to look at it too often. Me. Okay, fair enough. What was it you wanted? Ab. I want Andy's get written on my pussy. Nope. We didn't do the tattoo. It was either some horribly abusive partner that wanted her branded with his name that I didn't consent to being part of. Duck that. Story 44. I had a woman grab my hand as I was lining the smallest of tattoos and thus ducking it up completely. I had a guy pass out and piss himself and then deny that it happened. Had a guy pass out and hit his head off the counter and give himself a concussion. Story 45, I've had a couple clients who just could not hold still. They were twitching and shaking every time the needle touched them. That sucks and you do your best, but it doesn't make a great story. So I'll go with the client who asked for a portrait of a rabbit in a frame with some blossoms. That's as much detail as she gave me. I do my communication and designing over email generally. I drew up her design and emailed it to her. She said she liked it, but asked me to redraw the rabbit's body shape, give it ears that stick up rather than hang down, to add more flowers, and to redraw the frame to be more simple. So literally change everything. I told her I would start over, but that I already spent hours on her first drawing. So I was going to offer it as an up-for-grabs design to other clients, so I could still make money for it, and she said that was okay. So I spent another 3-ish hours redrawing her tattoo, sent it to her, and she responded, "Hey, I don't like it. Can I just do the first design?" I told her hell no. She just had such a specific picture in her mind, but she could not communicate it. And when I followed her instructions, she still wasn't happy. I ended up having to have her come in and watch me draw it at the shop so she could give her opinions in real time. The cherry on top is that once she was happy with it and I finally tattooed it on her, she didn't tip anything. So yeah, clients who aren't good at communicating but have a super specific image in their head of what they want are a nightmare. But especially when they don't tip on a custom design after you spend hours of your free, unpaid time drawing it to their exact specifications. Story 46. Not an artist, just a customer. But I overheard this. I'm sitting waiting for my artist to finish up working on her current client, just leafing through flashes and other artwork. I noticed one of the other artists was putting a large rose/skull stencil on a guy. He finished placing the stencil and asked his client if it was okay. The client quite seriously said, "Wow, that was much easier and quicker than I thought it was going to be. No pain at all." His artist just stared at him, but I laughed, assuming he was joking. He gave me a, "Why the duck are you laughing?" Look, he actually meant it. Story 47. My artist told me that when he was an apprentice, he had a woman sign off on her underage daughter getting a tattoo. It was a tramp stamp. The girl was young, so my artist doesn't tattoo underage people now. Story 48. In a machine shop I worked at with about 100 employees, becoming a tattoo artist became a fad for like 2 years. There was maybe 3 or 4 kits being sold and traded amongst easily 15 different guys who all thought they'd make it big doing tattoos until they got bored and sold the kit to the next hopeful arrest. Watched a guy on his lunch breaks give a free tattoo to a 20-year-old coworker in his car. This kid cried each lunch break for like a week. It was his first, and I hope last tattoo for his sake. It was supposed to be a cowboy riding a bronco on his inner forearm, but in reality it was an infected collection of smears and blobs. If I was drunk and going blind, I guess you could convince me it was what he claimed. Kid had to be on antibiotics for a while because of the infection, but I imagine dunking fresh tattoo skin in coolant isn't a great idea ever. Story 49. I was a pretty fresh apprentice tattooer at the time. A woman came in and said she had been referred to me by a guy I knew. I told her I hadn't been tattooing very long, but if she was comfortable with that, we could move forward. She immediately gets weird and kind of aggressive, saying he told her I'd been tattooing for a year already. I was kind of taken aback by the out-of-nowhere escalation of the situation and just said he must have been mistaken. I'm a very anxious person, and truth be told, I was already nervous at this point, but being an apprentice, I didn't know how to politely decline work. So I try to move past the awkwardness and ask her if she's comfortable working with me. No pressure, I'm new, and she can work with my mentor if she feels so inclined. No, I'm fine. She launches into what she wants, and with every sentence, I'm getting more nervous because I know I'll never meet her expectations. She's been thinking about this tattoo for 10 years. It means the world to her. She wants to incorporate all this music imagery with her kids' names into a big calf piece. I can just tell that she's seen an image in her head for 10 years, and I'm just never gonna match it. But I desperately try. We set up a time for her to come in and look at the design I draw and make any changes, move forward with making an actual appointment. I don't know what the hell she wanted from me. She was so bad at explaining what she wanted, but so aggro about insisting it looks some exact way. Like she'd act like I was an idiot for asking clarification questions. And I was still confused. So I'm so anxious, thinking about it every day leading up to the point. I tried my best to interpret all the elements she wanted. But if you've been tattooing for a while, there's jokes about wanting a bunch of design elements that don't mesh into a good design. But you try to tell people that and they're just like, this is what I want, make it work. But it won't. It won't work. So anyway, I try my best. I think I've got an okay design out of her million elements she wants incorporated. Again, wouldn't accept this kind of work now. And she comes in to view the drawing. I try my best to give people what they want in a design. It means a lot to me to be able to do that for people. So I really want people to like the art. She comes in, takes one look at it, and breaks down sobbing while intensely staring at me in the eyes. This isn't like OMG, this is perfect. This is, I absolutely hate these tears. I say it's okay if she doesn't like it and she can just work with my mentor. My mentor also desperately doesn't want to work with her. You could just tell nothing would live up to what she had in her head. She's bawling and I'm panicking because I don't know what to do. Finally, my mentor comes over and tries to talk her down. She ends up taking this woman on and does an acceptable job of designing something she wants. The lady sets up an appointment and gets the outline, and then we just never see her again. I will never forget her because she was so intense and made me so uneasy, and there was just no pleasing her. I felt like utter crap after that experience. Story 50. I got a tattoo on my right shoulder blade of a sword in stones with purple butterflies, my sister's favorite color, and my sister's full name and date of birth. She's 2017. Not dead, just wanted her close to me. And I was shaking the whole time. Apparently, the tattoo artist was irritated with me for shaking so much, he told a friend of mine later. Story 51. Back when I was doing my apprenticeship, 2018-ish, I had a girl who wanted a simple cross, like the Christian cross, on her wrist. Very tiny, no bigger than a quarter. Just line art. Simple job, in and out. One of those, the setup will take longer than the tattoo type deals. Except it wasn't. Girl came in with a handful of friends as moral support because it was her first tattoo. Now, admittedly, I use coil machines. Anyone who knows the distinction knows that they can be kind of loud, and that can be startling to people who haven't been tattooed before. But it's that classic sound that you'd hear in the movies and stuff, so it's not like it should be completely alien. So I let her know, as I do with all my clients getting tattooed by me the first time, that my machine is kind of loud, but I promise it doesn't hurt as bad as it sounds. She asked me if it was okay to take a Snapchat video real quick before we started. I said okay. She then starts up a video and says, "This is Anon, and I'm getting my first tattoo." Basically what it would be like for a TikTok video if TikTok was big back then. Whatever. They're all like 19. But then I hit the pedal. I crap you not, it took this girl 45 minutes for us to get a 30-second tattoo done. Because every time I'd hit the pedal, she'd start squirming and squealing and grabbing onto her friends yelling, "Wait, wait!" After a few attempts to even get the needle near her and me, getting pretty irritated, I told her that she didn't have to get this done today if she didn't want to. But I already told my friends I would. Duck that. It's your body, and your friends can go. Duck themselves? They're not the ones going through this. Nor are they the ones who are going to have this tattoo on them the rest of their life. You probably won't even be talking to half of them by the time you're 25. But she insisted, so I decided to go a different route. I took the needle out of the tube and, with her consent, poked her with it, just to show her a small bit of what it would feel like. Thankfully, she was able to get it done after that. But my God, I was about ready to just call it quits on her behalf and tell her to come in later when she grew some balls. Like, yeah, tattoos hurt, but we can tell when you're really not ready to get your first, and I'm not gonna stand for that. But my friends bees, your friends can come in and get tattooed instead if they're that passionate about it. Only other kinds of clients that end up being a pain in my butt are the over-eager first-timers, like the kind that haven't even gotten stabbed yet and they're already planning out entire sleeves in their heads. First off, maybe see how you do with your first one, because you might decide you ducking hate it and never want to go through it again after you're done. Second, see what it's like to take care of a tattoo first, because aftercare is a whole other thing to deal with. And third, if it's your first tattoo and you're designing sleeves for yourself, I promise they're not as good as you think they are, and your tastes will hopefully change by the time you'd complete a sleeve anyways, if you went into it with that kind of gung-ho attitude. Can't tell you how many times I've seen newbies show me their sleeve designs, and it's just mismatched doodles, stoppers everywhere, stuff that won't look cohesive in the slightest, and will just be a mess of random ideas, and will likely have more gaps of empty skin than actual tattoos. It's one thing to get an intentional flash arm, but you can tell when someone's sleeve just wasn't thought through. Story 52. I feel I might have been up there on someone's worst tattoo virgin. I was visiting family in Hawaii and decided to finally pull the trigger on getting a tattoo. It's a tribal armband, but with a bit of a video game reference thrown in there. Aren't I original? Anyways, being freshly out of college and 21 at the time, I get crap-faced the entire night before with family alone because I like being drunk. Wake up the next morning, day scheduled for the tattoo, feeling amazing because I was 21 and never got a hangover. Was going to take about 1.5 hours. To do the tattoo, no biggie. My father was in the room cringing the whole time, but the pain really wasn't bad. only stung when it was on the more tender part of the inner arm. Anyways, 45 minutes in, my stomach grumbles. I have the whiskey craps bad. I ask the dude if I can use the bathroom. He's cool, and I head in there. I proceed to wreck that place with a stench so foul. I came out, and all of the other artists and their customers had left the building. Smaller studio, and my guy and father were just laughing their asses off. I had to sit the next hour and 15 minutes. Had to extend the time because you can't have a giggly artist sticking you in pure embarrassment. Still have the tat, still have the shame. Story 53. My moment has finally arrived. I have a good one. Worst experience I've ever had with a tattoo virgin, or any client for that matter. Guy comes in and 2 lines in, I can tell he is about to pass out. Nothing major. So I stop to hold him as he is falling off the chair. Then he proceeds to violently puke as he is still passed out. So I have to put him on his side and clear his nose, mouth, the noise, the smell. I was in a horror movie. Ended up calling 911. He got checked. I didn't even get paid that day because it was literally 2 lines in. Poor dude. I wonder if he finished it or got it removed at some point. Also, poor chair we had to throw away. Story 54. I was part of a youth outreach program in high school, and we had an officer come in to speak to us about gangs. One thing he did was show the symbols and colors of local gangs and talk to us a bit about each one. One guy he showed had a track of wolf paws across his chest with some filled out and some just outlines. We all start whispering to each other. Do you fill in a paw each time you go up a rank? Each year in prison? Each time you kill? Nope. The guy said hurt too much to get them all filled in. Story 55. Not mine, but my former roommate had a girl getting some white girl top of the foot tattoo as her first. It's admittedly a horrible spot pain-wise, and honestly they usually look really bad in just a few years, and I don't recommend it for a first tattoo. You want that one to last. Anyway, she was the typical bring all my friends in to watch, and I want to take pics. My buddy let her and only because she was hot. Her friends were all pretty, and I guess that makes my normally surly tattooist put up with it. He wasn't nice, but he tolerated it instead of booting them out. There were tons of snaps and Insta posts of the stencil, the machine, chair, ink and caps, like everything. He finally leans in, and the instant the needle hit her foot, she puked like that little demon girl from The Exorcist. All the annoying friends did work out for my buddy though, as they served as a human shield to the amazing fountain that was this girl's face. A shield for his wall art, as she couldn't bear to look. This, of course, was also recorded, and why I still hold a grudge that Snapchat deleted it. I know that's the point, but this belongs in the Library of Congress. It turns out the foot tattoo was to commemorate day number 1 of this girl's new healthy lifestyle. She was talking all about her pre-workout, how hard she went at the gym, and her new shake-based lunches. The tattoo went on later, and he didn't charge her for cleaning or for the first appointment. Story 56. Not an artist, and I know it's too late, but I got to see a pretty hilarious event. I was 18 and getting my first tattoo. While the guy's working on it, this young guy comes in. He looks like a Backstreet Boy, and he has a literal harem of gorgeous girls with him, all fawning over him. I'm getting a back tattoo, so I'm on my stomach facing the chair, where he's gonna get whatever he gets. I can't hear what he's saying, but he's obviously talking himself up, and the girls are going cray over how edgy he is. Takes his shirt off, he's got the pecs and abs, he's a hot dude, and the girls are all excited. Piercer comes out and starts cleaning his chest. He's getting a nipple piercing. I'm no toughie. I'm getting a back tattoo. So I'm just enjoying the hot girls and the hot guy, while my artist does his thing. He gets all ready and the piercer gets him, and he passes out for a straight minute. The girls start freaking out and the piercer takes it all in stride. Just keeps an eye on him. She's obviously a pro. Little plastic cup of water waiting for him. Eventually he wakes up, and between his wounded ego and all the girls, he was obviously trying to impress all of a sudden, switching to mommy mode and trying to take care of him. I have never ever in my life seen a better. I will never ever forget the look in that man's eyes as he gets talked through the sanitization practices and walks out. You could just see in his eyes that he fully intended to ride the high of his first piercing by ducking all of those girls at the same time. Just to have his ego utterly destroyed by a woman that probably only had a year on him, but is covered head to toe in art. Then, my artist told me it was the first time he ever popped a pimple while tattooing someone, which is why you never ever bring people to your first session. Story 57. Not a tattoo artist, but I did ask the person doing my first tattoo if they had any interesting stories. Apparently one woman wanted to get her first kid tattooed on her arm, which can be nice, though baby faces look notoriously bad in tattoo form. So she agreed to have a consultation with them. Turns out said lady wanted to have the tattoo done of her baby during birth, coming out of her while it was crowning. It was the ultimate representation of life or something for her, I think. And she was more than happy to share the photos her poor husband had been forced to take of the lovely moment. Needless to say, The artist politely declined. Story 58. It's a personal story for me, but when I was 18, I wanted this really cliché, lame infinity tattoo with a quote that was from a book that was super popular at the time. Think Tumblr girl era. Anyway, kept on setting an appointment with this shop and pussying out last minute. A few months later, a friend who had a bunch of tattoos was like, "Hey, let's go get some random tattoos." And honestly, I was like, if I don't do it now and to not think of it, I won't pussy out. So I went for it and got something simple and ridiculous. I noticed in my college notebook, I kept on drawing simple triangle sailboats. To this day, I have 2 thigh pieces, an arm, elaborate tattoos from phenomenal artist. Yet, here I am 10 years later, and my super simple drawn sailboat tattoo on my ankle is by far my favorite tattoo on my body. And I never got that Tumblr girl tattoo, thank God.